Hello, everyone. Glad that you're here and that you joined us on brokenandmended.com. This is directed at, well, first of all, anyone who has come here because they're interested in the subject of chronic pain, but also especially for those that are part of the Broken and Mended ministry, those that might partake in one of our support groups that meet on first and third Tuesdays of every month. This particular Tuesday, I'm going to be gone, and so we're not going to have another uh, support group meeting. We're not going to have a Zoom meeting, which a lot of people join us that don't live here in Woodward, which obviously this is a small area, pretty remote, and I want to have a reach just anywhere in the world really. The internet allows us to be able to do that. So a lot of people join us on Zoom, but we're not going to have a meeting this coming Tuesday on the 19th because I am going to be away for spring break on vacation, and the group's not big enough yet to where I feel like that we can go on without me, not because someone else can't lead the group, but because we're such a small group that right now if someone's gone, um, that it's even smaller. And so I think I just want to record my thoughts for this week and put them on the blog. And these are the thoughts I would have shared anyway had it been there. Now, if you ever participate in one of our support groups, which we hope that you do, and you can find information about that here on the blog, I believe there's a whole page dedicated that lets you know what you need to do to get connected. But we do more than just me talk, thankfully. We have a discussion, we have some prayer time, people share what's going on. Sometimes we have a story, sometimes we have a guest speaker. And I wanted to mention that on April the 2nd, we're going to have Esther Smith, who is a counselor who also deals with chronic pain. And she's going to be sharing a little bit about her ministry, which is called Life in Slow Motion. And particularly, she's going to be talking about the connection between anxiety and chronic pain. And we want you to join us for that because it's there's you can join us through the computer, you can join us in person, but I think it's going to be a unique topic, unique time for us to get to spend together. And so I'm excited about that. And then in just 2 weeks after that, I believe on April the 16th, we'll have Kelly English, who will join us in person to speak about the connection between grief and chronic pain. So I don't want you to miss that either. And so that's going to be coming up. And even for Kelly when she comes, even though she's coming in person, the event will still be available through Zoom. So look at that and get some more information. I don't want to waste any more time on this blog post doing doing announcements. I want to share a little bit about what I wanted to talk about for this week. I'm finishing a series in the book of Job I'm a preacher, if you didn't know, if you're just visiting this blog and don't know me. And I've been preaching through the book of Job, and I'm finishing that this Sunday. So those of you who go to church with me may hear some of this again on Sunday, but I've spent a lot of time on Job the past few months. And Job is a story of a man who goes through immense suffering involving incredible pain and loss. And, some of the worst pain imaginable and worst grief manageable invade Job's life at the same time. I want you to think about that. Think about the worst pain you've ever had. Think about the worst grief you ever had, and merging together at the same moment of time. That's what was going on with Job. And then you got Job's wife who thinks his best course of action is to curse God and die. She's suffering too, obviously, because she's lost all her children, if you're not familiar with that story. But nevertheless, not much of a support to Job. He has three friends who come and support him and do a pretty good job for about a week, and then they begin to berate Job and say, hey, this is your fault. You wouldn't be going through the suffering if everything was right in your life, and you're hiding some wickedness from God. And if you would confess it, then God would bless you again. Now, if you've been told that by someone, it's so wrong, and you know how hurtful that is. Well, imagine having to listen to your three closest friends tell you that speech after speech after speech, and no matter how much you protest your innocence, they won't believe it. And so Job turns his anger back at his friends and at God. First of all, Job's not giving up his integrity. It's the one thing he has left. If he agrees with his friends that he's done something terrible, then his friends or then his integrity will be compromised because it's not true. His friends will have their way, but it won't honor God, and it won't help Job because, again, it's not true. So he's not about to do that. So he gets angry at God. He gets angry at them. And he wants God to show up at his summons to give an account for all the bad stuff that's happened to him. And that's an interesting way to put it, a summons. Can you summon God? Can you call God to a courtroom Can you sue God? Well, that's basically what Job is trying. And through this process, God doesn't show up for a long time. And Job asks many versions of the why me question. Haven't we all? Haven't we all wondered why we suffer what we suffer and why it has happened to us? And maybe we blame God for that. Maybe we blamed others. Maybe we even blamed ourselves. But we've asked that question. And the problem with the question is that shouldn't it bother us that shouldn't it bother us only when, or let me rephrase that, shouldn't it bother us when things happen to other people and not just to us? In other words, we get upset and we ask why me precisely because it has happened to me, precisely because it has happened to you. When others are suffering all the time and it hasn't happened to us, we don't seem to be that upset about it. So I'm pointing out some inconsistency there in that question, some a little bit of hypocrisy that I think we're all guilty of it. As it relates to chronic pain, I can remember clearly a time in my life I didn't have chronic pain. And I didn't spend a lot of time asking the question, why me about chronic pain? Well, because it didn't apply to me. And so there's a little bit of selfishness in the question. I understand that it can be a healthy question to ask God as a lament. Why, oh Lord, has this happened? It's okay to cry out to God. But the truth is, if you really want to look at an answer to that question, as to why some people suffer and why others not, in this case, why me, there's not really a good answer to it. And why me is a self-centered and futile question, if there ever was one. And I'm not condemning you for asking it, because we've all asked it. Job asked it, and God did not condemn Job for it, but he did confront him eventually. And if you know the book, you know that when God did answer Job's summons, which he finally does, he shows up. He doesn't come to answer Job's question. He comes to give him an answer to a question he wasn't asking. The better question is, who is God? That's the question that really matters. And that question takes the focus off of us and centers it on the divine cause of everything in existence. And that is quite an upgrade in perspective. From the perspective of why me, this very myopic, short-centered view of everything through what's happening to me, to God of all, who's created all. If we reject God and we insist on our own miserable experiences, that should determine our entire outlook on reality, then that's a pretty grim prospect indeed. And don't you want to believe that there is a reality that transcends all of our suffering and it gives meaning and purpose to not only the universe, but also to our lives? Because if not, if there's no God, then there's no answer to your why me anyway. But if God is really who he is, who he says he is, then that gives us an incredible hope that far outweighs our sufferings. So who is God is really the better question by far. Because when you're asking that question, you're asking, is God someone I can trust? Is God someone who can help me through this difficult suffering that I'm going through? Is God someone who is just and whose plans and purposes will ultimately prevail? Those are better questions. And those are the questions that we have to come to term with. And the ultimate question of who is God is really the most important question we could ever ask. And I think that helps when we're stuck in the why me to remember who is God. The Apostle Paul was troubled by some ailment. We don't know what. And he asked God to remove it. And I haven't read the story recently. I think he asked him 3 times. And he calls it his thorn in the flesh. And God answered him in a vision. And his answer to Paul was, my grace is sufficient for you. God was willing to tell Paul, or God was telling Paul, that I am enough. And so the question I want to leave you for this afternoon for me, or whenever you watch it, this particular post, is God enough for you? Because you're not likely to get an answer to why me. But if God is enough for you, then you can get through it. I hope it's some encouragement, and I'll see you next time that we meet like this. Take care.